Heartwarming revelation. Mafia boss discovers hidden twin sister at fiancé's unexpected funeral. The funeral was draped in sorrow, the air thick with whispered disbelief. Tony Ricci, the notorious mafia boss whose name inspired both fear and respect, stood at the edge of a steep grave as the world around him faded into a blur. Maria, the love of his life, lay silent in the casket, her beauty untouched by the tragedy that had snatched her away too soon. Drowning in grief, he felt the weight of mourning pressing down on him, a suffocating shroud. A murmur passed through the crowd, gang members exchanging hushed words behind him, relatives' worried glances cast like daggers, and hollow words of sympathy offered by friends seemed like daggers to his bleeding heart. He stared into the abyss of emptiness left by her absence. A woman approached a ghost from a distant past. Her striking brown hair framed her face, reminiscent of Maria yet strikingly different. With trembling hands, she introduced herself as Angela. The name struck him like a lightning bolt, igniting long-buried memories buried deep within a family stained by organized crime. "I'm your sister," she whispered, unleashing a storm of emotions that crashed against the walls Tony had built around his heart. Angela was everything Tony had wanted to be but felt trapped from becoming hardworking, resilient, a testament to the American dream. Each word she spoke resonated, echoing with hopes and dreams, painting a vivid picture of what life could have been. He felt a complex mix of admiration and guilt. She had lived without the bonds of loyalty that had shackled his very existence. He longed to embrace her, to protect her from the shadows of their lineage that he wished to escape. And yet, the more time they spent together, the more the threat of rivals loomed large. Gangs that once bowed to him were now circling, sensing his vulnerability. It was a palpable tension that hung in the air, thick like smoke from a fresh gunshot. Angela, unaware of the dangers, stood defiantly against the very system that had cast them aside. Their bond grew, sharing dreams of a normal life, moments filled with laughter and stories of what could have been a direct contrast to his life shrouded in lies and betrayal. Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Tony was struck by the depth of their connection, the warmth of family he had long shunned suddenly becoming a bright flicker in his dark life. Yet just when hope began to blossom, his old mentor emerged, a grating reminder of his past. The man insisted on loyalty above all else, pushing Tony to decide where his true allegiance lay. Torn between a desire for redemption and the crushing weight of expectation, the tension reached a fever pitch as rival gangs sensed Tony's distraction. They became bolder, threatening to dismantle everything he held dear. Just when he thought he was on the path to a new beginning, the stakes escalated. A rival gang made a sudden move, leaving Tony wrestling with his identity in the chaotic streets that were once his domain. He felt the walls closing in, realizing that the sister he had just discovered might be the key to breaking free or a reason to lose everything he had built up. As the storm clouds gathered, Tony was left pondering. Would he stand for family, or would the sins of the past drag him back into the shadows forever? The day dragged on, each tick of the clock echoing the turmoil inside Tony's mind. He could feel Angela's presence beside him, a brightness in the bleakness that enveloped him. She stood taller now, more resolute, as if spurred on by the intensity of their bond. They huddled together in conversations about their past, piecing together the fragments of their lives, but beneath the surface, tensions simmered dangerously. He could see the shadows of rival gangs, once familiar faces he had trusted, swirling like vultures around a carcass. Each step Angela took brought both hope and alarm. How could he protect her from a world that had claimed his fiancée? The past hung over them like a storm cloud, and he wondered if it would consume them both. "Tony," Angela said one evening, her voice even yet laced with concern. They sat in a dimly lit room, the scent of old wood grounding their conversation. "I can't be in your world without knowing what it's like. I want to learn about the bricks and mortar that built you." He looked at her, that fierce determination in her eyes, and felt a stirring deep within, a mix of pride and the fear of exposing her to the darkness. You don't know what you're asking for, Angela. It's not a place for you. It's dirty, messy, and filled with blood. But it's part of who you are, she urged, leaning closer. And if we are to be a real family, I want to understand you, Tony. I've lived in shadows all my life. It's time I stepped into the light with you. Her words hit him like a punch. Was this what he wanted? To bring her closer to the chaos he knew too well? He wanted to say yes, to show her the life he had lived, the thrill of power, the adrenaline of the underworld, but he recoiled at the thought of what it could cost them. Just then, the front door creaked open, and an ominous shadow slithered into the room. It was Marco, one of his old associates, a hardened man whose loyalty had begun to fray. You need to return, Tony. They're moving against you. You can't let them smell blood, especially now. Tony's heart raced as he processed the betrayal in Marco's tone. I'm not going back to that life, he replied, jaw clenched. But fear twisted in his chest. Was it even a choice? Angela glanced between them, sensing the shift. The room filled with a heavy silence. Tony felt torn in two, one part still yearning for a connection with Angela, the other weighed down by past loyalties that refused to let go. He looked into her eyes, filled with trust and determination, and for the first time felt the possibility of breaking free. Tony, Angela began, but he silenced her with a gesture. He couldn't let her become a pawn in this dangerous game. We need time. We need to figure this out away from here, away from them. Suddenly, the future seemed like a tightrope walk. Could they possibly have a life together while the world around them threatened to collapse? As he grasped her hands, hoping to protect Angela from the fate he had lived, the decision loomed larger than his past transgressions. With his heart racing, Tony took a deep breath. Let us go. We'll figure this out together. But know this, Angela, once we step into my world, there will be no turning back. Unbeknownst to them, chaos had already begun to unfurl at their backs. And as the door creaked behind them, his old life was ready to catch up. Would stepping into the shadows ignite a bond they couldn't escape? Or would they be engulfed in darkness just as Tony had once been? The air around them felt charged, electric with the weight of their decision. Tony pulled Angela closer as they stepped into the night, the world outside their door flickering under the glow of street lamps. He could feel her heartbeat against his side, a steady rhythm that anchored him amidst his chaos. Where are we going? Angela asked, her voice soft yet full of bravado. Just a place where we can talk, Tony said, glancing over his shoulder as they walked. The shadows seemed thicker than before, but he wouldn't let fear dictate their course. Not anymore. They crossed through alleyways that whispered secrets. Members of a forgotten life watched from a distance, but Tony was fueled by a protective anger. Angela, he said, breaking the silence, if we're going to do this, we need to be smart. You have to keep your guard up. Once you step into this world, it's not just about you anymore, it's about our survival. I can handle it, she assured, her chin tilting defiantly. I face my share of darkness too. I won't shy away now, Tony. He nodded, admiring her strength, but doubts began to crawl back into his mind. How could he allow her to embrace this life, the fear, the violence, the betrayal? Would he be giving her strength or leading her into danger? They finally rounded a corner, arriving at a small diner that felt like a haven wrapped in nostalgia. The neon sign flickered, inviting them in. He held the door open, ushering Angela inside. They settled into a booth in the corner, the scent of fried food and old coffee wrapping around them. Tony examined Angela's face, the determination radiating from her. You should know that my past is complicated. Then let us unravel it, she said, her fingers tracing the outline of the chipped table. Tell me everything. I want to understand the man I'm standing beside. As he began to reveal fragments of his history, watching friends fall, the brutal codes of loyalty, the pain of loss, Angela listened intently, her eyes widening and softening at all the right moments. Each story tore at a piece of his heart, but sharing them also created a strange bond between them. Just as he finished recounting the incident that led to his fiancée's death, his phone buzzed on the table. A name flashed across the screen, one that made his blood run cold. Marco. Answer it, Angela urged, her voice firm. A surge of emotions coursed through him. Would it be more dangerous to engage or disengage? What if it's a trap? Then we'll deal with it together. He hesitated, but the look in her eyes pushed him. This was a test they needed to face. With a shaky exhale, he answered. Tony, came Marco's voice, a low growl. They're making their move. We can't wait any longer. Tony's heart thudded as he sank deeper into that familiar pit of obligation and fear. I need more time. No more time or it's over, Marco warned. As he ended the call, chaos swirled around them like a storm. Angela's expression shifted from support to concern. What now? I can't drag you into this, Angela. If they're really closing in, you should go. No, she cut him off. The fierceness returned. You're not sending me away. If there's a threat, we face it as a team. Something within Tony shifted. There was no turning back. Not anymore. All right, he said, determination hardening his resolve. We face this together. But the moment it gets too dangerous, you promise me you'll run. She reached out, squeezing his hand. I won't abandon you, Tony. In that instant, they became bound by more than love. They were entwined in a fate that neither had foreseen, but it was one they would navigate as partners. The door of the diner swung open just then, and a chill swept through the room. Tony's instincts flared. Was it trouble? He turned to see a figure stepping in, silhouetted against the streetlight. Was his old life finally catching up to them? Or was it someone more unexpected, someone who could change everything yet again? The door swung wider, letting in the sharp night air, and Tony's breath caught in his throat. The outline of the newcomer was obscured, cloaked in shadows, but Tony could feel the tension radiating from Angela. She sensed it too as the figure stepped forward. The diner's overhead lights stripped away the gloom, revealing a face that sent a jolt through Tony. It was Marco, but he wasn't alone. Sliding into the booth across from them, Marco was flanked by two men whose expressions mirrored his intent. Serious and hardened water from decades of being in trouble's embrace. Tony, Marco said, his voice a shade softer than before. I hope you didn't think you could hide from this. She didn't, Tony started, but Marco cut him off. You're in deeper than you realize. We're cutting the chit-chat. Marco turned his piercing gaze toward Angela, sizing her up. Who's this? Angela straightened, unyielding. I'm not going anywhere. You said you needed Tony. Well, here I am. Marco held her stare for a heartbeat. That's bold. But do you understand what you're stepping into? With her chin raised, Angela replied, yes, and I'm not afraid. Neither is Tony. Watching, Tony wanted to grip her hand tighter. She was fierce, and it made his heart swell with pride. Yet, dread curled in his stomach. He couldn't allow this to be her reality. Marco leaned back with a sigh. We don't have time to waste. The syndicate is moving on us. If we want to stay ahead, we need a plan, one that doesn't get anyone killed. The words sent a chill through Tony. What do you mean? Let us just say they've got their eyes on you, Tony. Especially after, well, you know how they twist the knife. Marco's voice lowered as he waved toward Angela. You can't afford to show any weakness now. Not with her involved. Angela glanced sideways at him, concern flickering in her eyes. I'm not weak. Angela, Tony started, but she silenced him with a determined shake of her head. It's okay, Tony. I'm not going to back off. But we need to figure this out together. For a moment, the whole diner felt frozen. The clatter of dishes and chatter silencing around them as they all grappled with the revelation. Could this be a new beginning for them, or would it lead to disaster? Marco continued, I know we're a mess, but you'll need allies. I don't trust many, but he paused, pulling out a folded piece of paper from his jacket, sliding it across the table. This could help. It's a safe house. We can regroup. The air hung heavy between them. Tony felt the weight of every choice looming ahead. Every thread connecting him back to a life he desperately wanted to escape but couldn't seem to abandon. Angela caught his gaze, her expression resolute. Tony, we can do this. We have to believe we'll find a way through it all, she whispered, gripping his hand protectively. Marco's demeanor shifted. This isn't a game. The stakes are real. But as he spoke, a loud crash echoed from the diner's entryway. The door burst open again, and three men in dark clothing stormed in, eyes wild with reckless intent. Where is he? One shouted, scanning the room. We know he's here. Tony, get out here. He could feel Angela's grip tighten, her fear nearly tangible. Time's up, Marco muttered, pushing back from the table. The air split with chaos as Tony stood, instinctively placing himself in front of Angela. His heart pounded. The stakes had just risen higher. Stay close, he warned, eyes darting to the threats advancing toward them. Whatever happens, don't let go of my hand. And as the storm broke around them, one thought screamed in his mind. This was just the beginning. But would they escape together? Or would one of them be pulled into the darkness threatening to consume them? The three intruders stepped into the diner, their presence sucking the warmth from the room. A knot twisted in Tony's stomach as he faced them, the weight of the situation drowning any thoughts of escape. "Angela," he breathed, glancing back at her, "don't let fear take over." She nodded stiffly, but fear shimmered in her eyes. He could tell she was processing their next move, her mind racing. "Stop right there," Marco shouted, motioning to the men as they advanced. In the blink of an eye, the tension escalated. The diner became a battleground, the flickering neon lights bathing everything in a surreal, urgent hue. Tony's mind worked furiously. He wanted to scream, to fight, to run all at once. But actions had consequences, and he needed to protect Angela above all. He took a step back, keeping her shielded behind him, the edge of the booth pressing into his lower back. One of the intruders, a tall man with a scar running down his cheek, laughed sarcastically. "You thought hiding would save you, Tony? You're more naive than I thought." He cracked his knuckles, a clear threat looming in the air. "Don't engage," Marco warned, his calm voice cutting through the chaos. "We need a plan. Then make one fast." Tony snapped, daring to glance at Angela again. She was pale, but the fire in her eyes signaled she wouldn't back down. The other two men positioned themselves, their movements predatory as they circled like wolves. Tony noticed the patrons around them had gone silent, an electric tension hanging, but no one dared to intervene. He could almost feel their combined breaths, a mixture of fear and disbelief. "How about I take your little girl here as leverage?" The scarred man taunted, a smug grin on his face. "How does that sound, Tony? Touch her, and I'll make you pay," Tony growled. Anger ignited within him, burning away the despair that had gripped him since Marco's arrival. "Boys, let us make this interesting, shall we?" Marco chimed in, his tone inflected with a hint of authority. "You're outnumbered. Think about your next move carefully." The intruders hesitated, eyeing Marco. He'd always been a strategic thinker, but Tony couldn't help but think that this time, their lives depended on it. Suddenly, the scarred man lunged toward Tony, but Marco was faster. With one swift motion, he drew a gun that had previously been hidden beneath his jacket. "Back off," he yelled. The diner crackled with shock. Tony felt his heart race. This wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a declaration of war. For a second, everything hung in the balance like a thread waiting to snap. Angela stepped forward, breaking between Tony and Marco. "Wait," she shouted, her voice steady despite the chaos. "There has to be another way. We don't have to do this." Time froze. All eyes zeroed in on her. The aggressors shared a confused glance. For a moment the world felt still, swept away along the currents of her audacity. Tony's heart beat with hope. Could her voice of reason cut through the madness? "Angela, don't," he urged, panic creeping back. But she stood firm, her resolve unshakable. "We can negotiate. Just listen to me." Tony's breath caught in his throat. Was this how they would find a way out, by confronting their attackers head-on? Before he could tell her to step back, the scarred man scoffed, "You think we'll listen to her? This isn't a negotiation. It's survival." "No," shouted Tony, drowning out the rising tension. "Maybe it's time we redefine the rules." Angela turned to him, a spark of determination igniting both their gazes. Could they truly defy the odds stacked against them? Suddenly, the door swung open again. This time, shadows loomed with unexpected familiarity. The atmosphere shifted, thick with impending change. "Hold it right there." A booming voice cut through the air. Tony's heart leaped. Could help be on the way, or would it drag them deeper into the storm? As he turned, dread coiled tightly in his gut. Whatever happened next would change everything. Would it be their salvation or final demise? The room held its breath as the booming voice rang out, a mixture of authority and confusion. Tony's chest tightened, anticipation thrumming beneath his skin. As he turned his head, the figure waiting through the door came into focus. It was Victor, the diner's owner, with eyes wide and desperate, a bulwark of familiarity in a stark moment of chaos. "Get back," he shouted, brandishing a baseball bat, his body trembling with either adrenaline or sheer fear. "Everyone get down." Marco's grip on the gun tightened, eyes darting between Victor and the intruders. The tension amplified instantly. With Victor's arrival, a new dynamic was introduced, but would it empower them or further incite violence? Victor Tony began, but he found himself cut off by the scarred man's cruel laughter, an unfurling of mockery in the silence. You think that's gonna save you? This isn't a game. He spat, leveling a glare at Marco, who still held the gun steady. Let us think this through, Victor shouted, stepping forward, bat raised. You don't want blood on your hands. Tony could feel the pulse of chaos rising like a wave, ready to crash. He stole a glance at Angela, her gaze fixed in unwavering determination. All that mattered was keeping her safe. With a firm voice he called out, Victor, stand back. We can't afford any wrong moves. The moment felt suspended, like a still frame waiting to explode. The patrons huddled, murmurs echoing into the tense atmosphere, feeding into the fear swirling around them. Tony could practically taste it, sharp, metallic, a visceral reminder of the stakes. Leverage, the scarred man hissed, his cruel smile almost serpentine. That's all this is, right? He took a step toward Angela, extending his hand as if to reach for her. No, Tony shouted, instinctively lunging forward, pulling Angela closer to him, a protective instinct surging through his veins. But before anything could escalate further, Victor swung his bat with ferocity. I said back off, he yelled, taking a defensive position next to them. Marco, caught up in the escalating chaos, shouted, guys, we don't have time for this. We need a plan. He was right, but as Tony looked into Angela's eyes, he could see a mixture of fear and courage, a crossroads they had to navigate together. The scarred man bristled, reassessing the situation. What's your play here, Tony? He sneered. Does the diner owner think he can save the day? You're gonna find out that's not how this works. Victor didn't flinch, holding his ground. This isn't just your turf anymore, pal. You have no idea what you're messing with, he said, looking at Marco, who shifted, apprehension dancing on his face. Just get out of here, Marco urged, his voice laced with urgency, glancing at the door. We need to think this through. But before anyone could respond, the front door swung open once more, the sound of sirens piercing the tension like a knife. It echoed through the diner, carving out a slice of hope amid the chaos. Police! A voice shouted from outside. Adrenaline surged through Tony. The realization washed over him, this was their moment. Would the arrival of law enforcement bring them safety? Or would it escalate the situation further? Angela, he whispered, his heart hammering in his chest, we have to act now. Together. Her nod was confident, her presence emboldening him. As the adrenaline coursed through him, he felt an unshakable bond. They were in this together. They were about to rewrite their narrative. Now, Tony shouted, seizing the moment as he pushed forward toward the intruders, determined to tear the weight off his chest and fight for their chance at survival. As the police shouted commands outside, the air crackled with the potential of a chaotic showdown. Would they break free? Or would they be trapped in a web of deception and danger? With every second counting down, he could feel the moment of truth revving up, waiting to break. Their hope hung in the balance, but so did their resolve. Would they escape the storm together? Or would their fight cost them everything? The moment hung in the air, electric with possibility. Victor glared at the scarred man, bat poised like a sword ready for battle. Marco stood tense, the gun still wavering in his grip. A cacophony of threats erupted outside as the police commanded order, the sound reverberating like thunder through the diner. Tony's heart raced. He was about to make a choice he had never envisioned. We're not backing down, he shouted, rallying his courage like a banner. With Angela beside him, he felt stronger, as if their combined wills could shift the tide of chaos. The scarred man laughed again, but there was a hint of uncertainty breaking through his bravado. You want to play this game? Fine. But remember, decisions have consequences. He stepped closer to them, a predator closing in on prey, his eyes blazing with menace. Stay back, Victor warned, swinging the bat threateningly. The patrons ducked lower, eyes wide with a cocktail of fear and anticipation. The tension was unbearable, but Tony wasn't about to let fear rule him. Not today. Now, Marco yelled, breaking the standoff. It was the cue Tony had been waiting for. He stepped forward, gripping Angela's hand tightly, and together, They bolted toward the kitchen door at the back of the diner. "Tony!" Victor shouted, and the bat swung again, desperate and fierce. It missed. The scarred man rushed after them, his growl echoing through the narrow passageways. "We can't let him catch us," Angela cried, urgency lacing her voice. A deep instinct pushed Tony forward, and they pushed through the kitchen door, slamming it shut behind them. The kitchen was a chaotic realm of flying pots and pans. A fridge door swung open, the cold air rushing out like a breath of fresh desperation. "We have to hide," Tony urged, pointing to the storage closet filled with bulky crates. They crouched behind them just as Victor burst through the kitchen door, bat raised high, scanning for them. Breathless, Tony pressed against Angela, their eyes locked together, fear and determination mingling in their gaze. He could hear Victor's footsteps pounding through the kitchen, frustration seeping into his growls. The sounds of sirens were still blaring outside, but inside, it was as if the world had contracted to just the two of them and the terror lurking in the shadows. "Don't move," Tony whispered to Angela, his heart pounding. He could feel her warmth, grounding him even amid the chaos. The opportunity to escape was slipping away, and Tony wrestled with the desperation clawing at his insides. He peeked around the crates, catching a glimpse of Victor, who was tightening his grip on the bat, his frame filled with fury. Then out of nowhere, a loud crash echoed from the entrance. The police had stormed in. "Put the weapon down. Drop it now," the officer shouted, and the air shifted instantly, infusing the kitchen with a different kind of tension. Victor's snarl changed, caught between fight and flight. "This ain't over." He spat, but he began to back away, the fight leaving his posture. The police had arrived, but at what cost? "Tony," Angela's whisper broke through the noise, her eyes wide and glistening. "What do we do now?" His heart raced, the weight of the moment crashing into him. Would they really be safe? With a rush of determination, Tony stepped forward again, ready to confront the upheaval of their world. "We're not done yet," he declared, looking back at Angela, whose hand squeezed his as if anchoring them both. But just as clarity emerged from chaos, the scarred man turned, his eyes burning with retaliation. "You think this is the end? You don't know what you're up against." As the police moved in to secure the diner, Tony felt a surge of resolve. He turned to Angela, knowing the storm wasn't over, not by a long shot. The fight was far from finished, and they were in deeper than they ever imagined. What lay ahead felt uncertain, but now as their fates collided with danger, he was ready to face it all. Would they discover the strength to confront their nightmares? Or was this only the beginning? The air crackled with tension as the police moved to restrain Victor and the scarred man. Tony held his breath, his heart pounding so loudly it felt as if it would burst. Angela's fingers danced with nervous energy in his grasp, making him acutely aware of how alone they really were in the midst of this chaos. The officers wrestled Victor to the ground, removing the bat from his grasp, but that did little to ease the knot twisting in Tony's stomach. Outside, the distant wailing of sirens hinted at a larger storm brewing, one that might touch every corner of their lives. "I can't go to jail," Victor shouted, his voice trembling with a mix of anger and fear. "You don't know what I'll do to you." They all heard it, his idle threat dripped with real menace. Tony's jaw clenched as his protective instincts flared to life. Angela's eyes darted to him, filled with a mix of anxiety and desperation. She was the tether that kept him grounded, but even she could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on them. As the officers secured Victor, the scarred man stepped back, watching, calculating. Fear washed over Tony at the thought that their ordeal might have just escalated beyond the diner. The scarred man leaned against the wall, a corner smirk twisting his lips. He seemed unfazed, a predator more interested in the thrill of the hunt than the outcome. "You'll regret this decision," he hissed, looking straight at Tony. "Yeah, well, we don't back down," Tony said, lifting his chin defiantly. The moment was critical. What if the scarred man wasn't just a name? They were in the company of someone bigger, someone who held power in shadows too dark to comprehend. "We need to get out of here," Angela whispered urgently, pulling him close. A moment's hesitation felt like an eternity. She could sense the storm brewing just as he did. This was not a simple bar fight. It was about survival, and the real battle would come once the dust settled. The fear in Angela's eyes mirrored his own. They needed to strategize. "Where do we go?" he asked, desperate for a plan that would keep them safe, away from the men they had just crossed. The kitchen was filled with sudden activity, but it felt affixed to a single moment watched through the lens of a horror movie. Back door. Angela pointed urgently towards a narrow exit at the far side of the kitchen. We can slip out and then we can call for help. Tony nodded, his mind racing. The police would be distracted with restraining Victor and disarming the scarred man. This was their chance. They could run, but their escape would only be temporary if the scarred man was as dangerous as he seemed. On three, he whispered, holding his breath. They crouched low behind the crates, hearts synchronizing in their mission. 1, 2, 3. They bolted, adrenaline fueling every stride over the tiles slick with grease. The door creaked as they pushed through, the cool night air slapping them in the face like a welcome embrace. Once outside, they paused, the sounds of chaos receding behind them. It was quiet out here, but it felt like the calm before a storm. They ran towards the alleyway, but the weight of their decisions loomed above them. Could they really trust each other to run? Tony, do you think they'll be able to find us? Angela's voice trembled, filled with uncertainty. Not if we keep moving, Tony reassured, even as doubt seeped in alongside fear. Just as they rounded the corner, they heard a voice behind them, heavy and cold. Nowhere to hide, the scarred man growled. Panic surged in Tony's chest. They had been followed, and fear clawed at his insides, demanding attention. Would they have what it took to keep running, or would the shadows catch up with them at last? They sprinted down the alley, breath coming in ragged gasps. Each footfall echoed against cold brick walls, the sound a reminder that they were not alone. Tony's instincts screamed at him to keep moving, to put distance between them and the danger closing in behind them. Angela grabbed his hand tighter, their fingers interlocked like a lifeline. Where do we go now? She panted, glancing over her shoulder as they dashed past a dumpster that smelled of decay. The alley felt like a maze, and the darkness seemed to swallow them whole. Just anywhere but here, Tony replied, trying to keep the tremor from his voice. They turned a corner, only to find another alley branching off. It felt endless. Fear began to nibble at his resolve. What if they were trapped? What if a flicker of movement caught his eye? Just ahead, a shadow darted past a flickering streetlight. Tony's stomach dropped. Did you see that? He whispered urgently. Angela nodded, her eyes wide. We need to hide, she said, glancing around for anywhere that might offer cover. They spotted a battered door set into the wall of an old warehouse. It seemed like a gamble, but risking exposure was not an option. They dashed to the door, pushing it open with urgency. It creaked alarmingly, but they were too panicked to focus on noise. Inside, the dim light filtered through broken windows, illuminating a space filled with forgotten crates and dust. Quiet, Tony whispered, hoping they weren't followed as they pressed against the wall, hearts loud in the silence. He could feel Angela trembling beside him, her breath rapid and shallow. What if they find us? Angela murmured, fear thick in her voice. They won't, Tony said, trying to project confidence. Just give me a moment to think. But the shadows felt alive. Angela's face glistened with sweat in the dim light, and he could see the fear dancing in her eyes. His mind raced with possibilities. How could they ensure their safety? Just then, the faint creak of footsteps echoed through the warehouse, reverberating off the walls. Tony held his breath again, straining to hear. The sound grew louder, a figure moving deliberately through the shadow. Panic surged once more, burning hot in his chest. Stay close, he said, moving to shield Angela, instinctively positioning himself as the first line of defense. The footsteps stopped just outside the door, and he could hear muffled voices discussing their escape. Where did they go? One of the men asked, voice low and menacing. It sent chills through Tony. Check the back. They couldn't have gone far, the scarred man answered, the words laced with malice. They were searching for them. This was a deadly game of cat and mouse, and the stakes had just risen. Tony's heart raced faster, pounding like a war drum. As the men moved away from the door, Tony seized the moment. We need to go, he whispered, adrenaline fueling his thoughts. We need to find a way out and call for help. Angela nodded, determination breaking through her fear. But as they inched toward the exit, a question loomed over them like a storm cloud. Could they really trust anyone? They slipped out of the doorway, ducking low as they navigated their escape. The air outside felt fresh compared to the suffocating tension inside. But just as they rounded the corner, the scarred man appeared again, eyes focused on them with predatory interest. "Thought you could escape?" he sneered, blocking their path. Tony's stomach twisted in fear but also anger. They were out of options now. Would they have the guts to face him, or would this be where it all ended? "Let us fight," Tony said, gripping Angela's hand tightly. But Angela's eyes widened, uncertainty flickering across her face. "No, we can't, trust me," Tony said with a conviction he didn't quite feel. They would face this together and hopefully find a way to turn the tide as they prepared to confront the threat before them. Adrenaline coursed through their veins. Would they find a way to outsmart the scarred man? Or was this the beginning of the end? The chill of the night air wrapped around Tony and Angela as they found themselves cornered. The scarred man stood before them, a shadow of menace blocking their path. His grin was cruel, a predator savoring the moment. Panic crept into Tony's heart, but anger surged alongside it. They had fought too hard to back down now. "Thought you could outrun us, huh?" the scarred man taunted, his voice dripping with mockery. "You're playing a dangerous game." Tony squeezed Angela's hand tighter, feeling her trembling. "We can take him," he whispered, breathing determination into her. Together. Angela's eyes shimmered with fear, yet there was a spark of resolve in her expression. "I'm with you, Tony. No matter what." Just then, a pair of headlights sliced through the darkness behind the scarred man. The sound of squealing tires echoed in the alley, and the intruder's gaze flickered with surprise. Seizing the opportunity, Tony pulled Angela behind him, their escape route through the shadows of the alley circling them. "Let us go," he barked, his voice a fierce command. They sprinted into the darkness, hearts pounding, fear and resolve melded into a singular force driving them forward. Behind them, the scarred man shouted in fury, "Get back here!" But Tony and Angela were free, racing into the night, feeling alive with purpose. Desperation fueled every stride as they ran through damp streets, pushing farther from the shadows closing in on them. Angela kept pace, her breath in sync with his, their feet beating against the pavement like a battle drum. "Where do we go now?" Angela asked, panting slightly as they turned another corner. Hope mingled with worry in her voice. "Anywhere, just not here." Tony's mind raced. The stakes were too high, the moment of safety felt fleeting, but they had to believe they could push through. They ducked into a small park nearby, the moonlight casting ghostly shapes among the trees. Here in the heart of chaos, Tony pulled Angela close, his hands gripping her shoulders. "We need a plan fast." Breathless, they caught each other's eyes, adrenaline still coursing through them. "What about Victor?" Angela asked, worry creasing her brow. "He could be targeting you now too. He won't be our problem. We need to focus on escaping the pass first," Tony replied. She was right, the web was tangled. Just when he thought they could breathe, new dangers emerged. "What's next then?" she challenged, her strength shining through the fear. "Next, we find a safe place and regroup. A secure spot to deal with all this." Something shifted within him as they stood on the edge of that precipice called uncertainty, the weight of their connection solidifying. They weren't alone in this fight. They had forged a partnership in the fire of chaos. "Together we can handle anything." They took a moment to breathe, feeling the shadows of their choices creep ever closer, yet the hope in their hearts wound to let them surrender. Before they could move again, the distant sound of sirens reverberated through the night air, growing louder. Angela looked at Tony wide-eyed. "They're searching for us. We need to get moving," he said, urgency flooding his voice. "There's a safe house I know, my old mentor's cousin. If we get there, we can hide and gather our thoughts." He led her down a different alley, moving swiftly, trusting that their feet could outrun the threats chasing them. Each step forward filled him with a sense of freedom, a newfound hope at what might await them if they could just overcome the dangers lurking in the shadows. With hearts, heavy yet lighter together, they pushed through the darkness, leaving the weight of fear behind. The night lay ahead of them, daunting yet promising. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they reached the inconspicuous door of the safe house, wedged between two large buildings. It stood tall, a quiet guardian in the chaos. As they stepped inside, breathless and churning with emotions, Tony closed the door behind them, sealing away the night's horrors. "Are we safe?" Angela asked, searching his eyes. For now, he replied, allowing a mix of relief and determination to wash over him. The reality of their bond settled between them, a fierce connection against the storm of their past. They face whatever came next together. With hearts full, they began to lay down the pieces of a new life, a life forged through shadows, but indomitable because of the light they found in one another. Step by step, they rewrote their story, driven by love, a love that could stand against any darkness. And as dawn broke over the horizon, defying the shadows of fear, hope flooded their beings anew. They weren't just fighting for survival. They were building a future, a beautiful, unbreakable testament to the strength that had brought them together. Now was the time for action. Suddenly, don't waste another precious moment. You need to subscribe to the channel immediately to not miss the next exclusive stories that will leave you breathless. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm, it really makes a difference. Comment below with your reactions and feelings about this powerful ending. And don't wait not even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this heartwarming transformation. Only true fans understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.